Hi everyone, this is my day 3 on snow. I am in Lake Louise still and I'm trying different boards, and obviously a new thing in the quiver, Takaharu Nakai EP Salomon hillside project in a 169 268 millimeter waist width. This thing has been tested here by myself yesterday and today for a few runs. Unfortunately, the conditions are marginal off-piste, so I'm not even attempting. There's like snow sharks everywhere. The Groomer is pretty good. Unfortunately, also lots of man-made snow, so it's not ideal conditions. But I mean, for a board test, I think ideal conditions are actually not that great, because you know, everything rides somewhat okay in ideal conditions. So yeah, this is a good test for a first ride on this board. Setup here is 30 degrees on the front foot, positive 9 degrees on the back foot, and 54 centimeter stance width. I need to refer to another video that I made. The thumbnail reads, "Do you know your snowboard?" And in that video, I am basically explaining how you can measure your own specs. And I'm using this very snowboard to actually guide you through this. And why I'm mentioning this is that I'm getting things confirmed that I basically only started thinking when I was taking those measurements, and also looking at the board in regards to its core profile, like the board's thickness in various areas along the edge. So the reason I'm trying to give you this kind of review of the board in this manner is I want to convey this message that you can actually take a snowboard in the shop, look at a lot of details, and form a vague idea, a vague opinion of how this thing is gonna ride. And I am basically getting most of these things confirmed in this particular case. So let's talk about how this thing rides. The very first impression, literally the first 5 turns on this board, I thought, there it is, the larger turning radius. So 8.5 meters, and then a long effective edge on a 169 obviously makes for turn entry that is on the slower side. Like, the board needs to be put on edge, like high board angulation, to actually perform a tight turn. This is something that I love. I like a board that gives me a large range of various turn radii. And as we know, the number stated on the specs sheet defines the largest turn that board can do, not the smallest. So if you have a board with an 8.5 meter radius and you're an expert rider, you can crank this thing close to 90 degrees on edge. You're potentially tightening that turn to half that number. And I love that, because it gives me room to move, right? Like, I can make this thing do what I want. However, there is the flex thing that I pointed out in my video. The board is softer in the center. There's a thin spot right here and a thin spot right here, and then the very center is kind of the same thickness as under the bindings. So there's clearly 2 flex points of the board right here, and that is something that I'm not necessarily used to from the boards I ride, and it is also something that I, from a carving standpoint, always perceive as not ideal, but that is also a preference. So take that with a grain of salt. Also, this board is predominantly a power board, and I'm quite certain that it's a really good power board. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to test it in power yet. So anyways, take this all with a grain of salt. It's not a carving board. However, most people these days try to buy a carving power board. And this is also why I bought this thing, because I was thinking, interesting. Lots of specs match what I need and what I appreciate. And I can probably make this a very versatile board with a different flavor from the rest of my quiver. So what happens when I crank this thing on edge is basically that after that rather slow turn entry, which again I appreciate, it kind of slows down edge transition, nothing throws you into the turn, it simply calms down your ride, and I like that, because if you're nice and composed, you're much better balanced, and you can set up the next turn in a better position. unlike you're on a board like that throws you into the turn and that almost throws you off balance, right? So I appreciate this kind of radius. However, as you crank this thing on edge, and this is me talking expert carving, this will be noticeable to a very small percentage of people out there. So again, take it with a grain of salt. When you really crank this thing on edge, what happens is that quite abruptly, this softer center between the feet somewhat folds, as in it gives in fairly suddenly, and then that tightens your turn fairly suddenly. And yesterday on my first day on this board, I actually got taken off the groomer twice and catapulted myself into the rope. That wasn't that much fun, although it didn't hurt. And I had to learn to apply the pressure through the turn more gradually and a little more carefully. And that is not something that I need to do on my other boards. I said this before, Stranda is generally rather stiff and thick in the center. It's more of a traditional core profile that doesn't necessarily lend itself all that well to foot steering, therefore performs incredibly well when you simply tilt it on edge. And that's kind of how I ride. But that's also the advantage of the Salomon Taka. This board, for being a 169 powder shape, free ride shape, clearly has more of a freestyle flex. And that makes the board pretty versatile and also approachable for someone who may be in the market for a longer board but doesn't feel like they have the skill level to handle that length. This board doesn't feel all that long. You have a 125-ish effective edge. That's not huge for a 169. There's a lot of nose going on here that contributes to the actual physical length of the board. So 125-ish edge is not really that much in the grand scheme of things. And the flex in the center is soft. You can steer this thing through your feet very easily. And then there's also this other aspect of the amount of taper on the board. This board only has 7 millimeters of taper. That would be the least taper in my quiver. My quiver starts at about 9 mil with the descender. And then the most taper I think I find on my K2 Simple Pleasures, which is, I believe, 22 or 23 millimeters taper. And my sweet spot is somewhere, probably between 12 and 18 millimeters of taper. However, on this Salomon board, the 7mm taper contribute to a board that is actually very easy and intuitive to ride switch. I didn't have a problem despite my fairly aggressive positive angles. So one thing that I tried to change today is I set the board up differently in regards to setback. The setback that I measured on the board, setback on the effective edge, was like 46 millimeters, which is a lot. So this puts you quite a bit behind the center of the side cut on this board. And then I measured the underfoot width, and basically moving both bindings one notch, one insert forward, gives me equal width under each foot. And since this is a radial side cut, so it's not progressive, it's not changing its turn along the edge, I can conclude that with an equal width underfoot, I'm now in the center of the side cut. So today I mounted the board further forward, and I expected two things. I expected even better switch performance, and I expected that with my weight a little further forward, that I can actually make this board initiate turns a little bit quicker. Because combined with the large side cut of this board, or large turning radius, it also has a relatively stiff nose. And I'm talking relative to the center flex. It's not like a stiff nose in the grand scheme of stiff noses, but comparing the nose flex to the center flex, there isn't all that much of a difference in this board. And I'm used to boards that bend easy in the nose, so I can very quickly enter turns and tighten my turn radius right at the top of the turn. And on a board like this with a stiffer nose, mounting yourself a little further forward may help with that. So I did a couple runs with this setup, and that all of this was confirmed. The board instantly became more playful because standing in the center of the side cut makes it quite easy to pivot this thing around underneath you, like kind of twin maneuvers when you switch from riding regular versus switch. And then it was easier to ride switch as well because I'm not so far on the tail, and clearly different in turn initiation, particularly like on a cat track when you just want to do quick little turns left, right. It felt way easier to get this thing to change direction right at the beginning of the turn. So board is obviously meant to be a free ride / power board, and therefore the reference stance is probably in the perfect position. But if you take this thing for groomer rips, I think it's beneficial to mount it a little bit forward. Yeah, all right. I'm very much hoping that I can get this thing into powder here very soon, because I think that's where it's going to shine. The board is overall very damp, not very much vibration going on here. You can point it, you can ride this thing very fast, confidently. Obviously, it's a 69, and that helps with that. But yeah, overall, like, it's a nice board, and I think the rider that will appreciate that most is someone who wants a playful power board, a playful free ride board, and people who might want to dabble with the experience of long boards and additional length, but don't feel confident with those numbers. 169 sounds like a lot. So this board is fairly easy to steer through the feet, and it's not overly intimidating. Therefore, for the people like myself who are advanced carvers, it's not quite enough. Like, I took this down some runs today where I hit some firm, not necessarily icy, but very firm spots underneath that man-made snow, and I lost my edge all of a sudden. And on many of my other boards, I wouldn't really blink, or I wouldn't really be afraid. But yeah, that put me into this defensive riding mode, and I started to be like, ooh, gotta be careful on this thing. So it clearly has a limit to hard carving, but again, it's not a hard carving board. That's not what it's meant to do. However, for me, that's always something that I appreciate in a board, because I just can't help it and tilt anything I ride on edge. Yeah, in regards to groomer performance, it's great, but it's not amazing. And I'm hoping to get it into powder, and hopefully that's going to be amazing. Yo, so I'm on the chairlift, and I'm going to insert this clip here real quick. I am now on my descender. I've done a couple laps, same conditions as 45 minutes ago. And you might have wondered, why is he comparing this to the descender? He was talking about comparing it to the shorty. Very good question. The vibes that I was getting from the Taka in regards to how slowly and gently it enters turns, and also how well it rides switch, made me very much think about my descender, much more so than my shorty. I didn't expect that, but yeah, that's what happened after first day on the descender, second and third day on the Taka. So now I'm back on the descender, and yeah, basically this can all be confirmed. The boards ride switch equally as well, which is awesome. That's the benefit of not that much taper, 7 mil on the Taka, 9 mil on the descender. And then same kind of slow, gentle turn entry. Of course, descender is 9 meter 10 on my 162. Taka is 850, so that's even more the case. However, the flex balance on the descender is quite different. The nose is clearly softer than the center, which is not that clear on the Taka. So yeah, I can bend this descender quickly into turns with a bit more front foot pressure. That's great. The other thing, obviously, Stranda signature, thicker in the middle, more solid in the middle, less ideal for foot steering. The Taka is more playful, clearly. The descender is clearly more of a big mountain battle axe. I find the board, like, the base speed is wild. I'm just realizing this again. Clearly faster than the Taka, although the Taka is already a fast base. And yeah, stompability on a board like the descender with that kind of damp wood core, which the Taka has as well. But the stiff center, you really can stomp it. And that's kind of the overall difference. Descender is clearly more of a battle axe. Taka is clearly more of a playful kind of free ride board. And, probably more for lower gears than going Mach 10. So yeah, that's the verdict on those two boards. I will compare the Taka to the shorty as well. Absolutely coming soon, I guess. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. All right, stay tuned. This got much longer than I wanted it to be, and what that shows you is that manufacturer descriptions in 3 sentences, they just don't do the trick. So the lowdown on board design is way deeper than a manufacturer description can give you. And I'm hoping that all the words and explanations that I've been using here today make any kind of sense. Watch my other videos. If they don't make sense, I'm hoping we can clarify in those videos. And yeah, otherwise, stay posted on my channel, share it with your friends, subscribe, like, the usual deal. And if you feel like you want to support my content, there is a page buymeacoffee.com/justaride where you can tip me in form of a symbolic coffee, and I will very much appreciate that.